I was cruising up I-85 doing about 80, heading north through South Carolina on my way back to Delaware. I left the Holiday Inn around 6 o'clock in the morning. I had attended manager's college for the last 4 days at the home office of the waste management company I worked for in Houston, Texas. You see, I've been working hard for the past 9 years, 4 of which I have been taking online courses in engineering to prove that I had what it takes to be a landfill manager. I got my bachelor's degree a few months ago, and when I was offered the position, I jumped on it with both feet. Now, I know what you're thinking. Landfill manager? That's a real crappy job. And sometimes it is, but it does pay good. Anyways, I was cruising, rocking out to Savage's Hall of the Mountain King CD when I got the call. If you don't know who Savage is, we can't be friends. Just kidding. Seriously though, I picked up my cell phone off of the passenger seat and looked to see who was calling. It was my mother. I turned down the radio, accepted the call and said, "Hey Mom." There were a few seconds of silence. "Jimmy?" she said softly, and immediately I heard the tears in my mother's voice. "Mom, what's wrong?" I asked concerned. "It's your father, Jimmy. He's been hurt." I heard those words and immediately slowed down, changing lanes, pulling over to the side of the road, put the car in park, and turned on the hazard lights. "Is he okay?" I asked. "What happened?" "Well, Jimmy, you know your father. Mr. Fix Everything himself. He was up on the ladder cleaning out the gutters when Thunder, the neighbor's black lab, came tearing around the corner chasing Simon. Simon is my parents' cat. He's tan and white and very fluffy." Anyways, she continued by saying, "The dog hit the ladder. It began to fall over. Your father jumped off of it and landed down hard on the ground, breaking his leg." "Oh my God," I exclaimed. "Honey, I know you're busy with your job and all, and I hate to ask, but we need your help, son. Your father's gonna be on those crutches for at least 8 weeks, and there'll be no one to tend to the farm. Please, son, please come home," she said tearfully. Now, I don't know any man or woman, regardless of how bad your childhood was or status of the relationship they have with their parents. If your mother calls you crying, you drop everything and go, right? And that is exactly what I did. "I'll be there by morning, Mom," I replied. I swear I could hear the smile through the phone. "I love you, Mom," I said. "See you in the morning." "Okay, Jimmy, I love you too. Bye," she replied. I then hung up the phone and put it back on the seat next to my cigarette tin. I grabbed the tin container with my tubes, tobacco, and roller in it, and rolled myself a smoke and lit it. I sat there on the side of the road smoking my cigarette and tried to calm myself down after what I just heard. You see, I roll my own cigarettes. Non-menthol, of course. It's a lot cheaper. I mean, I could get a large 1-pound bag of tobacco. I like the good stuff, really. That's the name of it. For about $17, which is equal to about 2.5 cartons worth, and 3 boxes of 4 Aces tubes, or about $2 a box, which have 200 tubes in each box, which is equal to a carton, totaling $6. 17 plus 6 is $23. So I could basically get 3 cartons worth of cigarettes for about a third of the price you would pay for 1 carton. Delaware prices, that is. The roller cost about $8. That's a one-time shot. Well, until it broke. Anyways, I calmed down, threw the butt out the window, grabbed the phone again, and went to Google Maps. I got the directions from my current location to my parents' house in Pennsylvania. I then called my boss and told him what happened, and that I would be taking a leave of absence under the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA for short. You all know what that is, right? Anyways, he didn't even argue with me. He just agreed, told me to keep him posted, and that he hoped my father would be alright. I then reset Google Maps and headed for Pennsylvania, turning the radio back on. It was about 4 in the afternoon at that point. I'd been up since 5 in the morning and now had at least 11 hours left to drive. I knew I needed coffee. I put the car in drive, turned off the hazard lights, merged back into traffic, and took the next exit in search of a coffee shop, and I found one. As soon as I came off of the exit, I stopped at the red light. There it was, coffee 24/7. I stopped in and got the biggest cup of coffee they had, something they called the all-nighter. It was a huge 52-ounce barrel-looking hot and cold travel mug. That thing was so big, it couldn't even fit in my cup holder. I had to set it on the seat and hope it didn't spill. I then rolled a couple more smokes for the trip. Who cares about that? Anyways, back to the story. I got the coffee, got back on I-85, and drove to Pennsylvania, stopping several times to use the bathroom and to get gas. Why I didn't grab something to eat, I don't know. I just didn't. I arrived at my parents' house a little after 3 in the morning. Now, given the fact that I had been up for almost 24 hours, I was tired as hell, even with drinking that whole mug of coffee. I decided to take a nap in the car. My nap was short-lived though, because at the break of dawn, the rooster started to crow. I did not miss that rooster at all. Anyway, I got up, rolled a smoke, smoked it, grabbed my stuff, and went into the house. I walked into the living room just as my father was waking up on the couch. He said he didn't want to risk falling off the stairs, given he wasn't too sturdy on the crutches. My mom came down shortly after, hugging me, put on a pot of coffee, and started making breakfast. We all then sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, eating breakfast, and talking. I hadn't ate anything all day yesterday. I had been driving all day, remember? I ate enough for 3 people. Anyway, my father took the liberty of writing down everything that needed to be done around the farm. You know, turning the irrigation system on, feeding the animals and giving them water, harvesting the crops if necessary, among many other things. Now, my mother noticed that I was dozing off during the conversation, told me to go lay down in my old room of course, and I could get started tomorrow morning. She could at least feed the animals that day. My father agreed, and so I did. I was woke up the next morning by that damn rooster again. I got up and put on some of my old clothes. They were a little tight, but I still got them on. I put on a few pounds over the years. You see, my parents left my room exactly the way I left it when I moved out, clothes and all. Well, the clothes that I left behind. Anyway, I went downstairs, rolled a smoke, and sat on the back porch smoking it. You see, my parents don't allow smoking in the house. When I was done, I went back inside, filled my barrel mug up with coffee, and took it with me to tend to the animals. I cleaned out the horse stalls, fed them, and gave them fresh hay, then let them roam in the field. I cleared out the stanchion barn, which is used for milking cows on a small farm such as my parents. Milked them, let them out to gaze, put most of the milk in the milk tank, and took a couple of buckets into the house. My parents drink milk straight from the cow. That's kind of gross if you ask me. I tried it once and didn't like it. I then cleaned out the kitchen coop. That's a smell you will never forget. Am I right? I also gathered any eggs they had laid. I grew up doing all of these things, so it was like second nature to me. Now, just as I was finishing up the chickens, all that coffee caught up to me, and I had to pee like a racehorse. I knew I wasn't going to make it back to the house, so I went behind the chicken coop. And that was when I saw it, the roof. I wasn't sure what it was at first. It was covered with large branches, a lot of them, like someone was trying to hide it. My mind then raced back to all those years ago and tried to remember if I ever saw this as a child, and I couldn't. I handled my business, then slowly removed the branches and saw the roof. It was a good-sized roof, about the size of a small bungalow. It was old and weathered, and missing a good portion of the front left corner. I finished all the duties, gathered the cows and horses, then went back to the house just in time for dinner. As we ate dinner, I couldn't get the roof out of my mind. I was intrigued, yet skittish. I asked my mom what it was, and she had no idea. I asked my father, and he said it had always been there, covered in branches, for as long as they've owned the property. It wasn't bothering anything, so he just left it alone. I asked if they minded if I checked it out tomorrow morning after feeding the animals. They agreed. We just sat down talking for the rest of the night. The next morning, that damn rooster got me again. I got up, got coffee, and fed the animals. I went back into the house and told my mom that I would be behind the chicken coop, checking out the roof, if she needed me for anything. She smiled and said, "Okay, have fun." I walked out of the house and back behind the chicken coop. I stood there staring at the roof. How the hell did this even get here? I thought. I bent over to try to look inside, but I couldn't see anything. I took my phone out of my pocket, turned on the flashlight, and shined it inside. The light reflected off of 2 beady little yellow eyes as this high-pitched hiss sound hit my ears. I stepped back in fear, and I'm glad I did. Just then, from under the roof came this fuzzy little creature, a raccoon. I immediately thought of the raccoon scene from the Christmas movie Elf. That movie was hilarious. When the raccoon attacked Buddy the elf, you know, Will Ferrell's character. I couldn't stop laughing. If I had been any closer, it might have saw me as a threat and attacked me too. Anyway, this raccoon seemed friendly though. It walked out, looked at me, tilted its head to the right, and just walked by me, making a whistling sound. It went around the side of the coop and disappeared. Now, what I did next may have not been the best decision I ever made in my life, but at that time, it sounded pretty good to me. I got down on the ground, on my stomach, and crawled underneath the roof, still holding the light. There was a good amount of space under there. Man, I could have used this as a fort when I was a kid. This is great, I thought. Now, my plan was to get off the ground and just sit under that thing for a while. It did not work out that way. As I went to get up, my left knee slammed hard against something that felt like a rock. But it wasn't. I grabbed my knee, reeling in pain, and sat back up, looking at the ground. There, in the dirt, was a rounded piece of metal sticking out. I bent over to clear the dirt from around it, sucking up the pain, and discovered it was some kind of round turning mechanism, kind of like a wheel. I dug down deeper and discovered it was attached to a round metal cylinder. It looked very similar to a rack and pinion, watertight hatch that you would see on a submarine. It was just big enough for a person to fit through, but I knew it couldn't be a submarine. What the hell is this? I thought. Just out of curiosity, I tried to turn the wheel, but it wouldn't move. I dug down deep and gave it everything I had, and finally, after several tries, it began to turn. Holy crap, I did it, I said to the open air. I repeatedly turned the wheel until I heard the locking mechanism open. Now, the hatch looked heavier than it actually was. I got down on my hands and knees. My knee didn't hurt as much then, firmly planting my hand on the ground and pulling with everything I had. The hatch came flying open, making this ear-piercing screeching sound and nearly ripping my arm out of its socket. It only weighed like about 20 pounds. There was another wheel on the inside. One to open it from the outside, one to open it from the inside, I thought. Anyway, as soon as the door opened, the overwhelming scent of stale air and a scent that I recognized but couldn't put my finger on hit my nose. It was bad. Really bad. I shined my light down into the hole and saw a thin pale green ladder extending from the opening down into the darkness. I got used to the smell, and then it became a fight between the adult in me and the adventurous little kid. The adult in me said, on the side of caution, while the kid in me, all he could think about was the movie Goonies. The little kid won that fight as I swung my right leg around, stuck it in the opening, found the closest rug on the ladder, and began to climb down. I was maybe 6 or 7 steps down when I heard a growling sound from above me. I shined my light upward to see 4 little raccoon faces peeking down over the edge of the opening and staring down at me. Ugh, I said, it's a family. Their heads then quickly retreated. Now, one would think that a raccoon would not have the physical strength to push a 20-pound metal hatch door closed, right? I found out the hard way that they did. Well, I assume it was them. I mean, who else would have done it? Anyway, seconds later, I heard that awful screeching sound once again as the door came crashing down. I'm sure gravity had a hand in it as well. No! I screamed and frantically climbed back up the ladder, still holding my phone. Now, in my frantic state, I reached up and grabbed the wheel, turning it back ever so slightly, and then it broke off. Gravity took hold once again as it fell, practically ripping the same arm out of socket once again and slamming down onto the other knee, still in my hand. I screamed, "Oh my God," as loud as I could, hearing it echo back to me through the darkness below. What the hell, I thought. Reality then hit me like a ton of bricks. The door, I screamed. It's not locked. It can't be locked. I dropped the wheel and pushed as hard as I could on the door. It did not move. No, I screamed again, frantically pushing on the door over and over and over again. Help me, Mom, Dad, somebody, help, I screamed as I heard my words echo back to me once again. After screaming and pushing for quite some time, I was completely exhausted. Face it, Jimmy, You're locked down here for a while. Mom knows where you're at. She'll miss you and send Dad to find you. He will, and everything will be okay. I tried to convince myself. As exhausted as I was, I needed to get off that ladder before I fell. So I slowly climbed down in. I climbed down and down and down some more. How far does this damn thing go? I thought. I finally reached the ground, stepping on the wheel and almost falling on my face. Jesus Christ, I screamed. Regaining my balance, I then shined my light around to see a full furnished living room, complete with a couch, end tables, lamps, pictures on the walls, and even a small 13-inch television. The decor was old and outdated. On the side wall were 2 levers, 3 gauges, and a series of red and green little indicator lights, as well as a closed door. The gauges were marked oxygen level, power level, and clean air indicator. They were all at 0. I know what this is, I said to myself. It's a fallout shelter from the 1950s or something. This is so cool, completely forgetting all about being locked in. I tried to turn on the light, but it wouldn't work obviously, but I had to try. The generator has probably been dead for years, I thought. I shined my light over to the right to see what appeared to be a kitchen and a small dining area. The kitchen appeared to be as big as the living room, with stand-up freezers lining the left wall, multiple storage cabinets lining the right wall, a small stove in the middle of the far wall, surrounded by numerous black 5-gallon buckets marked water. There were paper plates and styrofoam cups on the table. Somebody lived down here. Hell, I'd live down here, I thought. But where are the people now? I asked myself. Now, in between the storage cabinets was an open door that led to a full bathroom. It was small, but had everything in it. I shined my light back down to the living room and held it on the closed door as I walked over to it. I was kind of reluctant to open it, but I finally did. And to this day, I wish I didn't. I opened the door and discovered where the people went and remembered what that awful smell was. That's right, decomp. As in decomposition, as in dead rotting corpses. I shined my light into the room to see 2 rotting corpses laying on a bed. Their skin had liquefied and was dripping off of their faces, hands, and feet onto the comforter and down to the floor, creating a huge pool of goo on it. One of the bodies appeared to be covered in what I can only assume was a nightgown. The other appeared to be fully dressed in what appeared to be dress pants, a button-up white shirt, and a black tie. The clothes were dirty and falling apart. Their eyes and noses were completely gone. Their mouths were open, revealing a mouth full of decaying teeth. There were stringy pieces of hair protruding from their skull, what was left of it anyway. The smell was immense. I screamed in shock, like a scared little schoolgirl. My scream echoed back to me, which made it even more frightening. I threw up repeatedly. After I finished vomiting, I slammed the door closed and went back into the living room. I put my phone on the coffee table, flashlight up so it would light up the room enough to barely see. I then sat down on the couch, rocking back and forth, completely horrified and mumbling to myself, I need a cigarette. But I left my tin in the house. There was no way I could get it. Damn, I screamed, dozing like a fiend. I finally calmed down and just sat there, staring at the blank TV. I began to pass the time by singing to myself, daydreaming, and counting the number of triangles on the wallpaper. There were 1,834. I will never forget that number. Anyway, I got a little thirsty, so I went to get some water out of one of the buckets, but they were all empty. No food in the freezers or the cabinets. There was nothing. I'm gonna die down here, I thought. I began swallowing my saliva in hopes it would curb my thirst, but it didn't. I then decided to lay down on the couch. There was no way I was going back in that bedroom. I closed my eyes and must have fallen asleep because I woke up to total darkness. I screamed and frantically reached for my phone on the coffee table. I hit the table about 3 or 4 times before I actually hit my phone. I picked it up and it was dead. Out of frustration, I threw the phone in the direction of the TV and heard it smash almost immediately. I then realized that I woke up to complete silence, as well as complete darkness. There was no rooster cawing. I laid my head in my hands and began to cry. I really missed that damn rooster, having no idea if it was the same day or not, if it was still daytime or not, or even what time it was. I sat there and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. Then I just laid there, staring into pure darkness. Now, I always wondered how Ronnie Millsap, that old blind country singer, never mind, that was most likely before your time. Anyways, I used to wonder how, given the fact that he was blind, how he could stop at the very edge of the stage almost every time if he couldn't see it. Then it hit me. He counted steps, and that is what I started to do. I ran into a lot of stuff at first, but I kinda got the hang of it. 12 steps from the couch to the bathroom, 9 steps from the bathroom to the ladder, 5 steps from the ladder to the table, and so on. To pass time, I would make a game of it. Not that being blind is a game, because it's not. Anyway, I would walk around and see how many steps I could take before I ran into something. 23 was my record. Over time, I grew bored with walking around and just laid there on the couch in pure darkness, with 2 rotting corpses not 20 steps from me, sleeping on occasion. I didn't know how long it had been since I had anything to drink or something to eat, let alone had a cigarette or a cup of coffee. It had been a while. With the combination of those 4 things, the isolation and the pure darkness, my mind began to play tricks on me. Now, they say that a prisoner confined to isolation for long periods of time will eventually go crazy. Well, I'm not sure if I'm crazy or not. My psychologist doesn't think so, but I'm not so sure. You see, at that time, my eyes began to see things that were not there. It started out with little balls of light slowly floating through the air, like fireflies on a warm summer night. Then it escalated. I started seeing figures in different parts of the shelter at different times, standing by the bedroom door, sitting at the kitchen table, peeking out from under the couch. Then they started moving, walking from the bathroom straight through the freezers, from the bedroom door to the ladder, and climbing up. I was completely terrified. I closed my eyes every time I saw one, and I'd still see them with my eyes closed. I thought I was losing my mind, and maybe I was, just a little. It was at that point I decided to venture into the bedroom. I opened the door and sat down on the bed, knowing what was on the bed with me, but didn't care. I gave them names, Hawkeye and Hot Lips. Bet you can't guess where I got those names from. Anyway, I began to have conversations with them about the weather, politics, or anything I could think of. Sometimes they would answer back, but sometimes they wouldn't. Now, I was laying in bed. I slept there a few times when I heard that familiar screeching sound. I shot up to a sitting position and saw a bright white light shining down from the opening, lighting up the ladder. "Hello," I whispered. "Police department? Is there anyone down there?" A deep, authoritative voice said. I got off the bed and walked to the ladder. 15 steps. I poked my head up to see the light shining down. "Hi," I said nonchalantly to the light. "Come on down. You're the next contestant on." "Sir, do not move. Stay right where you are. I'm coming down." "Sarge, I think I found him. Give me a rag, please." "Sir, it smells horrible in there," the authoritative voice said again. I just stood there. Soon after, I heard the clanking of heavy boots on the rugs of the ladder as the light came down towards me. Moments later, what I thought was a light turned out to be a man in a police uniform holding a flashlight. He stood in front of me, shining the light all around. "Are you James Jonathan Rigby?" he asked, with his face covered. "I don't know," I replied, and honestly, I didn't. "Do you have any identification, sir?" he asked. "I have a picture of me in this thing," I said, reaching into my back pocket and handing him my wallet. He opened it up and said, "We've been looking for you for days now, sir. Apparently, my mom called the police when I didn't come back that night. Please come with me. Is there anyone else down here with you, sir?" he asked. "Just my friends in that room there," I said, and pointed to the bedroom. "Stay here," he said, as he shined the light forward and walked to the bedroom. He shined the light again, then immediately took a few steps back, almost falling over the back of the couch. He grabbed his shoulder mic and said, "Sarge, we've got bodies down here. 2 of them. Call the coroner pronto." He then raced back to me. "We gotta go now," he yelled and pushed me towards the ladder. "Up, go, now," he yelled. I then climbed up the ladder and out of the hole. The roof was not over the hole anymore. It was turned over on its top right behind where it sat before. I climbed out and saw my mom and dad standing there, as well as 3 guys and 1 girl in police uniforms. Dad was leaning on his crutches. "Jimmy, oh my God, thank God you're okay," my mom said, hugging me so tight I thought she was gonna break me in half. "We have to get him checked out, ma'am," one of the officers said. I was then told to sit on the ground and wait for an ambulance to arrive. My parents gathered around me. The lady cop gave me a bottle of water to drink. I drank it all in one shot. When the ambulance arrived, she escorted me over to it. As I was walking over, I saw the family of raccoons sitting on the corner of the coop. The biggest one then rose up on its hind legs and appeared to wave at me with its right paw. Now, you would think that after everything that had happened, I would be angry at them, but I wasn't. I was just happy to be out of there. I waved back to them, and then they scurried into the woods. We arrived to the ambulance and got inside. I spent 2 days in the hospital, hooked up on an IV to make sure I got plenty of fluids. I had to talk to a psychologist to assess my mental state because of the traumatic experience I had. I talked to her a couple of times, and she said that given the fact that I was dehydrated and malnourished, plus detoxing some serious drug addictions, I guess they considered caffeine and nicotine to be drugs? Well, they kind of are. Anyway, she said that is what caused my hallucinations and gave me her stamp of approval to go home. I didn't hallucinate anything. I know what I saw. Now, Mom and Dad brought me basically anything I wanted to eat, as well as a large cup of coffee every time they came to visit. When I got out of the hospital, I was back to my old self and resumed taking care of the duties around the farm, and I've never been so happy to hear that rooster caw in the morning. I did a little research on my parents' computer and come to find out that a tornado actually came through this area in 1954. The property my parents live on now was then owned by an elderly couple named Norman and Anna Simpson. They lived in a small bungalow-styled house that was completely destroyed in the storm. The bodies of Norman and Anna were never found until that day. That must have been how the roof got on top of the hatch and the branches got on top of the roof, the storm. That explains everything. No one knew it was there, I thought. I had to get a new phone as my old one was stuck in the TV down in the shelter. I didn't mind though. It's a better phone than the one I had. I recorded the rooster cawing and now use it for all of my alerts and notifications. I decided to make my home in the fallout shelter. It's so cool down there. I extended the ladder to above the ground, removed the hatch, and built a shed-like shelter around the opening with a real house door that I can lock and still get out. My father knew a guy who knew a guy that knew everything about fallout shelters. He helped me find the generator down there. It was in the bathroom. I filled it up with gas, flipped the switch, and miraculously, the damn thing still worked. Almost every light in that place came on. I replaced it shortly after, just to be on the safe side. He also said that the clean air indicator light was faulty, causing it to always show that the air was unsafe outside. Mr. and Mrs. Simpson must have died thinking that the air was bad outside, so they stayed in the shelter until everything ran out, and so did they. Rest in peace, Mr. and Mrs. Simpson. My parents were kind enough to claim the remains, had them cremated, and buried the ashes together on the side of the house, planted a tree on top of the grave, put a bench out there, fenced the whole thing in, and made a little memorial out there. I visit them from time to time. I also found an old picture of them when I was clearing out the shelter. I framed it and hung it on the living room wall. Mom said she read about the ashes and tree thing on one of those story posting sites. I just thought it was a cool idea. I called my boss and told him what happened. He laughed at first and then asked if I was okay. I told him I was and told him I decided not to come back and I wanted to apply for a transfer to a branch in Pennsylvania. He wished me luck and said he would see what he could do. I start at the landfill in Greencastle on Monday. Not a landfill manager, but at least I'm qualified to be. It took me all last week to clear out everything in the shelter. I had to take most of it apart, like the couch, the bed, and a few other things to get them through the opening, but I did it. I kept the stove, all the freezers, and all the storage cabinets. I don't know how they got the mattress and box spring down there, but I had to cut them both up and put them in contractor bags and carry them out bag by bag. That was fun. I bought a new flat screen TV that just barely fit through the opening, as well as a DVD player. I had a ton of DVDs. Also, a microwave and a coffee pot. I went back to Delaware and got my clothes, my CDs, and all my DVDs, as they were all I really cared about. I borrowed my dad's truck so I could get it all in one trip. I changed the wallpaper to something more modern and put linoleum on all the floors, with area rugs on top of that. Anyway, I decided to go with a futon cushion, that way I could sleep in the living room and use the bedroom as my writing area. I put a small desk with a chair and a lamp in there. I stockpiled cases of gallon-sized spring water and just got back from the grocery store before I started writing this. I am fully stocked with food. Now, I don't know how this is possible, but I actually get cell phone service down there. Well, that's my story. Tonight is my first night. Well, my first night since I made it mine that I'm staying down here. I'm gonna relax now, make some coffee, and watch a marathon of Stephen King movies. Oh yeah, by the way, I haven't had a cigarette since the day I got stuck down here.